Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Bull Sessions with Mark and Ken. Our June 13th, 2023 session. We don't have episode numbers, but we have dates. That ought to be enough. My name is Mark Robertson, and I'm joined here by the award-winning and standing ovation deserving Ken Kavula.
I don't have any sound effects or anything. I'm sorry, Mark. Okay.
Well, we can. There you go. Yeah, Ken was the recipient at the recent national convention of the Ken Janke Award for a minimum of 25 years of volunteer service to the realm of investing in investment clubs. So, congratulations from all of us, Ken.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I must say that I asked Mark kind of in confidence if he knew why I was getting all of these emails congratulating me, because I had not been informed and I didn't attend the session for Bink. Shame on me, where they announced it. So I will be much more aware going into the future on these virtual Binks than I was at the last one here.
Well, at some point in the not too distant future, I'll actually share a picture during a bull session of your award.
Okay,
and
great.
At some point, you'll actually have your physical hands on it. Now, it's not, a gold Heisman, which I think would be cool, but it's certainly a tremendous honor, and you certainly deserve it. All right, so we're going to play with a little more electricity this afternoon. There is other stuff going on. Ken advises me that Western Alliance, the bank, is actually north of $40 again. So that makes many of you happy out there in the audience. And the turbulence continues. I mean, there are a number of things out there. We'll talk briefly about commercial real estate and some of the stuff that Matt has been continuing to publish on the forum. But that cartoon up at the top from Scott Adams, and he did give permission for anybody that wanted to copy it and use it to actually do that. Blanket permission. That's reality. I mean, I was at a family gathering this weekend, and this happened. I mean, people are standing around talking about AI. I happen to be in a group of people that understand crypto and that kind of stuff. So it was rather interesting. And lo and behold, they did reach the conclusion that we're all going to die. I don't know about you.
But that was probably true before the barbecue as well, Mark. So,
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I pointed out that the food was so delicious and plentiful that was probably more likely to kill us. But whatever. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll continue down that trek of our electrifying future. Kind of some interesting stuff we've been digging into and having some fun. And yes, Ken, that puffy shirt does come with the Ken Janke Award. So.
All right. I'm wearing that to the next Bink, okay?
Awesome. You and Jerry Seinfeld.
Yep, uh-huh.
All right. And here's our weekly reminder that this broadcast is not sponsored by Portillo's, but it should be.
Somebody ate the sandwich, though, Mark. It's blank here.
Well, Ken, I went looking for a picture of a salad from Portillo's, and that's what's pictured here.
All right.
They
kind of a small one, right?
One. In all fairness, they do have salads. I just couldn't find a picture of one. So if I find one, I will share one. All right. All of this is about education. No investment recommendation is intended. We're simply sharing stuff that we have learned working with the Modern Investment Club movement for several decades. The decades for the group itself actually goes back nearly 8 decades now. Again, lessons learned and deployed, and trying to just help each other do a better job. If we own something, we'll try to remember to mention that, and please do your own homework. The roundtable is a couple weeks away still. If you'd like to be added to a reminder list about our monthly webcast where we share 4 or 5 ideas and walk through most of the analysis of those ideas, send an email to nkavula1@comcast.net. We are actually back in that 15 to 16 rate of return annualized realm again. So things have actually been going pretty well. I published a statistic that this year, over the last 12 months, and Kevin Galogly is probably going to take credit for some of this, we're actually operating at a 10 percentage point relative return to the market for the last year. So that's actually been quite pleasant to experience. If you have any suggestions for future topics, again, in the green room before the session, we talked about the notion of maybe spending a little bit of time with options for a variety of different purposes, including when one position dominates a portfolio, either individual or club. What might be done, you can send to either of our two email addresses on there. Anything else you want to add, Ken?
Well, we both like a little bit of guidance. If you would like to move into a little bit of education about options, maybe for just a couple of weeks, let us know. And if you think that that's something that is either beyond you or not interesting to you, let us know that as well. We'd like to keep these topics that we're choosing focused, and these are just ideas that we have that might be interesting. I know that I have one investment club where the members would be extremely interested in learning a little bit more about options, but if our core audience doesn't want to do that, then we don't want to go there either.
Yeah, and again, anytime we talk about a subject like that, I am reminded of the time I was at a Beardstown Ladies Investment Club meeting in Beardstown, Illinois, and they mentioned that they were working with Homer, their broker, on understanding covered calls and using options. And they asked me the question, and they literally all looked at their shoes, like they were ashamed, like I was going to zoom in some NEIC authority of some kind saying, thou shalt not do that. No, the whole idea of gathering with friends in these decision pods, also known as investment clubs or groups of interested investors, is to understand these things and make an informed decision about whether or not they're right for you. It's that simple. So that would be the angle that we'd be coming at anything like that from. So I believe in education. I know you do too, Ken.
Yep.
All right, here's a quick look at our chart. Again, the level of the market has that light green bar on the right has probably popped up a little bit here in the last day or so from the most recent check-in point. The average return right now for the companies in return forecast for the companies in the Value Line Investment Survey is at that 13% level, right down the middle, and we see a little bit of opportunity, perhaps. I mean, this is basically at 13%, and the blue bars are below the blue line. So can find a few companies, a few opportunities that are real right now. Here's just a moment of celebration straight from Grit Capital and the Twitterverse. We actually are back to being in a bull market. Did you feel any different after this happened, Ken?
No, not at all, Mark. It's sort of like birthdays. You get past 11 and they all feel the same. So
Yeah, Wall Street spends a lot of time, energy, and emotion on these numerical moments, but we are officially back in bull market territory. Great. All right, here's a quick one. I just got a kick out of this. We know Christine fairly well. I've spent time with her over at Morningstar, and she's something else. And we had talked a few weeks ago, perhaps even a few months ago now, about pointing out how challenging it has been over the last several years to have an international blend in your portfolios. And I had forgotten. I remember now, but much like a game of Trivial Pursuit, I now remember this, that Jack didn't believe that you really needed individual international stocks and portfolios. I guess I'm not surprised as he's the index fund guy, but and we actually have presented the counterpoint to that. Brad Perry's observation about, basically be willing to go anywhere. Now, be selective, be prudent, but be willing to chase opportunity wherever it manifests around the globe. So just kind of an interesting comment and reinforcement there.
I'll tell you, Mark, that I only own two mutual funds. That's all that I have left in my portfolio from my beginning days as an investor. One of them is ACINX, and that's the Acorn International Fund, and the other is HAINX, that's the Harbor Capital International Fund. They're both pretty broad international growth stock funds, and they've been having a wonderful year, both of them. They have a reasonably high concentration of Japanese stocks, and I think that is one of the drivers of their growth at the moment right now.
Yeah, and I've always had, Harbor, first of all, has been outstanding for decades. So that's a good, Acorn obviously has got quite a track record also. I've also enjoyed watching Artisan International over the years. I don't know, maybe we'll go back and take a closer look at this topic at some point, but um, I'm a fan of, finding that opportunity anywhere, whether it's a company named Toyota, for example, or something like that. We'll look at Novo Nordisk as it's actually Novo Nordisk. I finally heard a company representative pronounce it. So I've always said Novo Nordisk, kind of the European pronunciation as I would expect it, but it's apparently Novo Nordisk. Did you know that, Ken?
Well,
You never
I'm
corrected
not
me.
sure, Mark. Well, that's because we had a Danish exchange student, and when I asked him the name of the company 15 or 18 years ago, he pronounced it with an E, Disk at the end.
Yeah, that's what I
So
thought.
I don't know if that's just a regionalism. I come from Cleveland, and Cleveland's in Cuyahoga or Cuyahoga County, depending on what part of the county you live in. So maybe it's a regionalism that just we don't know about. But either way, I think we get the idea across about what company we're talking about.
All right, moving on. Just a real quick thing. Matt Spielman had shared, courtesy of S&P in their strategic report. The name escapes me right now, but just some reinforcement that all real estate is local. Not even this is granular enough from where I come from, but at least it's admitting that East Coast does not equal West Coast, etc. And it was just an interesting report looking at this notion of how uh, difficult or challenging the real estate, residential construction seems to be for the Wall Street analysts. And that's shown here also. I mean, for the last year or so, anytime we have mentioned a residential construction company, we do get considerable pushback from audience and, as evidenced by the Wall Street analysts. But Green Brick, who's too small to be on this list apparently, um, actually has pretty spectacular returns over the last year also. But those numbers are big relative to the stock market and virtually unexplained by the Wall Street rhinos. And it's something that I know, Ken, is one of your favorite areas where you can demonstrate that they just don't seem to get a pretty good handle on it.
Well, the only place, Mark, that home building stocks have survived in my holdings is in my own personal portfolios. All the clubs that I belong to chose to buy those stocks high and sell them low. I think they got the whole rubric wrong, and you know, I was a great one for telling people that at the depths of the downturn in housing stocks might have been the best time to put a few of them into your portfolio and hold them for a couple of years. That's certainly uh, uh, at one point, my clubs and myself, we owned 4 of the 5 on that list. That's certainly a pretty good appreciation over the last year if we're talking about dividend and stock appreciation together. Uh, what's that number? Uh, that is stock price appreciation in that first column,
It
right, Mark?
is. This would be stock price appreciation here over the
Yeah.
trailing year, end of May through the end of May.
Okay.
And the other one that I
So,
found kind of interesting is I maybe I just don't remember, but the average value of these homes is pretty impressive, and
yeah.
it's actually another reminder that in that realm, the economics and everything probably don't behave as many people would expect. And we pointed out last week and the week before the number of people that have, you know, just a sliver for a mortgage or no mortgage, you know, or they locked in interest rates at 2, 3, or 4%. They're just not as affected as many people in the newspaper business think. All the signs would indicate. All right. The other thing that
I'm just getting a question mark, LTM, and it's down there in the legend, folks. If you're looking for some of these letter things, what they mean, LTM is last 12 months. If you're trying to figure that out.
yeah, I usually see that as trailing 12 months TTM, but for whatever reason, this analyst is using LTM. I did actually run into that in a number of different places after I saw it here, too. LTM. Okay. And Matt and others have actually posted on the forum this concern over commercial real estate. And the one report that I was looking at was basically having a bit of a fit over the fact that uh, commercial real estate as a percent of total assets had reached 10.7%. And for me, I, I have to back all the way back up from the forest and start thinking about what are we talking about here. And I have to look at it, you know, I need context and I need a longer term look. And when you look at U.S. bank commercial and industrial loans over total assets, you see the two trends that are right there. That top one divided by the bottom one gives you the graph on the right. And what that is basically saying to me, again, they could be distressed and in a whole lot of trouble, but this level, you know, anywhere in this range right here is certainly not off the scales to the upside. So commercial real estate loans as a percent of total assets is not unduly high. And again, you're looking at 40 years on that chart. So again, that's context for me. Now you have to dig in deeper and figure out, you know, how much trouble are they in? There was a building in San Francisco, a famous building that sold at 25% of um, book value, whatever you want to call it, just recently. So I mean, there is some stuff happening.
Mark, just to help the people that have weaker eyes or older eyes, that last peak there, is that a 2018 or a 2019 peak?
This last peak on the
The one
right
on
hand
the right. Yeah.
on the right hand side, yeah, this would probably correspond with this peak over here, which would have been this peak right here would have been. Um, Now you're asking my eyes to work. That is actually COVID. That's right in early
Okay. So
2020.
it's okay.
You know, obviously the COVID disruption. We show pictures of the guy in the swimming pool. That's it too. This market was not immune from that either. All right. So again, context for me says that number's not inordinately high. Now there's other underlying stuff that needs to be looked at, and we'll probably take a look at that. We also shared one of our subscribers shared a new website that I had not looked at in quite some time. The name of the site is Wolf Street, WOLF Street, Wolf Street, probably after the Leonardo DiCaprio inspiration. But that has a bunch of articles on commercial real estate, and I want to go through those and see if there's anything there that can be done. I haven't bookmarked a site like that in a long time. I did bookmark that one. All right, just a quick update on our groundhogs. This is kind of fun. We now have 58 groundhog millionaires. It's kind of interesting because we started with 171. But at least we are up to a number that's quite a bit higher than it has been for quite some time. Matt continues to lead. Um, I'm kind of riding the Ardellix wave up there near the top at 15, Ken. And it's good to see both of us on this list. And a lot of prominent investment clubs, many perennial leaderboard residents on this list. Lone Star of Texas, though, is a newcomer, and they are in the top group entry.
And I think, Mark, to be fair, when you start looking at entries that are in the second 40 and the third 40, they invariably, out of the 5 or 6 or 7 stocks they've chosen, they invariably have a regional bank in them. And that's the one that's just yanking them way down the list right now.
Yeah, so we have to hope for some recovery there because we know many of our people do have active positions there. Kathy Wood, interestingly, did not move up. I thought she would move up a little bit with the Tesla price action, and the monkey dropped even further down the list, so we'll just celebrate that. All right. Well, the list of best small companies is actually a little stronger than it's been. There's a little more green on this page, Ken, and we did move up 5% above the original $1 million, and we are almost caught up to the Russell 2000 Growth ETF, and we did close the gap a little bit on the total stock market. So I guess we will take that as a fruitful week and just hope that the powerful trends continue.
And continue to pay homage to Technoglass, okay?
Yeah, that one is saving our bacon.
Yep.
So, all right, here's a quick reminder about some of the other stuff. We've talked many times about how the small and medium-sized companies have really been in the toilet, and they seem to be coming out a bit. Here's Louis Navalier. He's great at discovering companies, and he's just pointing out that a fairly rare event is happening, and that the Russell 2000 is taking off a little bit over the last several days. So Louis pretty reliable when it comes to this kind of stuff. Kind of fun. And of course, Louis is saying the last time this happened, this is good. So this would be really good for our best small companies if that were to be the case. All right. So let's go ahead and dig into our electrifying future a little bit more. If you're ready, Ken. I was tempted to switch out that rusty GE nameplate there with something a little more respectful. Maybe I'll do that for next week after we take a look at some of the slides in this week's summaries. Here's just a quick example. I went and asked ChatGPT, what's going on, where are the best opportunities, and they basically kicked back these 8 major theme or topical areas, and pretty hard to escape the fact that grid and infrastructure is up there quite a bit. There's even grid and infrastructure stuff in the stuff that doesn't say grid and infrastructure. So there's a whole lot of opportunities to be looking for in these areas. And ChatGPT is kind of fun to play with. All right, so here's a slide from last week, and I don't think it does justice to what we're actually talking about here. This is major. I mean, in order to get where we seem to be headed with some of the renewables and that kind of stuff, we're going to need a lot more electricity and a lot more transmission and distribution, no matter what the ultimate sources are. And those are big numbers. And there's going to be a lot of money spent building all of that out. So that's where we want to try to hold our finger up like a wind turbine. That's probably the wrong thing to say, isn't it, Ken? Hold our finger up into the air and we'll hold 2 fingers up. We don't want to cause a riot here. And see which way the wind is blowing. And we did kind of close down last week with this notion of nuclear fusion being pretty powerful. So I just wanted to close down the discussion. If you go to Crunchbase and look at some of the investors, and this particular company is private, it's Helion. We talked about it briefly. This is the company that signed the power purchase agreement with Microsoft to deliver actual fusion power by 2028. And as you dig in a little bit deeper to some of the investors, which include Elon Musk and a few other names that you would recognize, this guy keeps coming up in all these areas. And I just wanted to share this because I find it absolutely amazing. This guy is he's credited as being one of the original people involved with AI. in Silicon Valley, and he apparently has time on the side to be involved in nuclear fusion. Do these people sleep? I mean, it's just amazing. And lo and behold, he popped up on my YouTube feed testifying before Congress. He actually answered questions like a human being, and it was kind of fascinating to listen to. So you can actually look that up if you want. Found it refreshing to actually hear somebody testifying before Congress that was willing to answer a question. And that's as political as I'm going to get. This stuff is promising, and they might be overly optimistic, but it is kind of fun to look at this stuff. And Hugh McManus has counseled that if you find people who seem to know what they're doing, even in the early stage stuff, you can actually track some of them at places like Crunchbase. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, viable fusion, in my mind at least, is going to change the world as much as AI, probably a lot more than AI. And I'm thinking about changing it from an economic standpoint. So
Yes.
much of what we do right now depends on the cost of energy. And viable fusion, you can move the cost of that energy down to the systems that produce it, and there's no fuel needed for it. It can use, well, it can use almost anything. Maybe I'm overly fond of the visual that comes from Back to the Future with the guy pouring garbage into the car to make it go with his fusion engine, but
In the
I
flux
do think
capacitor.
in the flux capacitor, right? But what I do think is that fusion is going to change the world in ways that we would never ever think of having it altered. I'm not sure that it's 5 years away or 10 years away, but
50.
it's a coming. And I think my grandson and my granddaughters might actually live to see it be something that's commonplace.
Yeah, and I find it, well, first of all, I find it refreshing and assuring that people like Sam are working on it, and they actually have quantified where they're trying to aim. They believe that's viable and feasible. And at 1 cent per kilowatt hour, that's at 8 to 10, I should say 80% less than the average electrical rate in the United States. So that would change a lot of things. All right. All right, so Ken and I thought we would spend a little bit of time talking about, you know, if we really are going to be looking at that much expansion in generation of power from a variety of different sources, including renewables, um, and perhaps fusion down the road, and the people who actually move the power or store the power, move it from point A to point B. And so again, I went back to Chat GPT just because I'm trying to put it through its paces and reach my own conclusions about how useful could this be. This is the list of companies that would headline transmission and distribution. Again, these are the towers that you see when you're driving around in your car, and the substations that you see all over the electric utility grid. And I'm a alumni of ABB and General Electric. So it is an area where I spent a lot of time. I did not ever work directly in transmission and distribution, but it's an interesting list. And these are the companies that basically will be counted on to provide, products and services to this need for infrastructure. Anything jump off
Mark,
the page?
I have a more general question for you, maybe. I know that maintaining the grid generally becomes the province of the company that owns that piece of the grid.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see people working on towers here near my home, I know it's Consumers Energy in Michigan
Right.
doing most of the work there. But do they contract out the building out of the grid and the replacing of the grid with more modern equipment and that kind of stuff? Is that contracted out, or is that handled by the individual power companies as well?
Some of the power companies, the majors, the Duke Powers and that sort of stuff, has the engineering and project management enough in-house that they do it themselves, kind of like self-insuring, if you want to think of it that way. The vast majority of utilities, however, um, do contract out the engineering and the construction of either power generation or this transmission and distribution. So again,
So would would we see construction and engineering companies on this list here, you think?
we could. I mean, I had not thought about it, but companies like Fluor, Jacobs is actually out there trying to brand themselves as being at the forefront of a lot of this AI and new energy stuff. So maybe that's somebody we need to take a look at for inclusion in this list. So what Ken and I are basically going to try to do, and I already told him the goal. The goal is to do at least as well or better than Jim Cramer's COVID portfolio. So we're going to actually go out there and try to pick some companies and watch how they do over time. And this is just kind of the starting point. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, Ken. Does that
Well,
give you some
I
idea?
guess I guess the first step then would be for me or whoever's following along with us to come up with thumbnails for a lot of these companies. I'm not very familiar with what a lot of these companies actually do. There's a couple of names that strike a bell, but I'm looking at number 18, for example, and asking myself, what is it exactly that Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories does? You know, are
Mm-hmm.
they designing the grid? Are they helping build it? Do they work with the construction firm, or are they a construction firm? How do they make that all work? So, uh, good answer, and I think I understand where we're headed, what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I was just simply going to mail this to one of your investment club members and turn them loose on an industry study and sit back and let them do the work for me. But you're, you're telling me
That ain't going to work, okay?
not going to work. You're smarter than that. All right. Well, we got to, the first thing is figure out exactly what is the scope of what they do. I'm also an alumni of Eaton, believe it or not, number 6 on the list. Um, what do they do? Where are they located? What's their scope of supply out there? And many of these are very international and global companies, so something to keep in mind. So here's a start. Just wanted to go in and see, well, what type of companies. The headliner on this list, for a number of reasons, can be ABB. And they just changed their ticker symbol from ABB to ABBNY. If you were not familiar with that, you might have to repair a dashboard or two if you've got this company. This is basically one of the General Electrics of Europe, if you want to think of them that way. It's a Swedish, German conglomerate that is basically involved in all kinds of areas of power generation, including gas turbines. They build all kinds of stuff for power plants. They are predominant, or actually a dominant force in transmission and distribution. A lot of times, those great big units that you see at the substations, they will actually be ABB hardware. So, I mean, they're everywhere around the globe. They have other divisions also, but very, very much centered on electrical equipment and parts. So I thought it's an interesting thing to see this fairly high quality company with a decent projected return. And again, our theory is that maybe some of these numbers in this column right here might not reflect some of that infrastructure pressure, positive pressure. This number might even be a little bit low at this point in time. So I just thought ABB was a kind of an interesting stepping off point, and then just simply taking a look at the industry that they are associated with, and it has been sorted by quality, so we could actually look for quality companies that are also kind of on sale.
Well, you know, Mark, that I've been focusing a little bit more uh, uh, directly on just charging stations for electric vehicles, and I've been involved in a club that's been focusing on and off in that particular arena. And what we've learned is that there's two standards for charging. There's actually a lot more than two, but there appear to be two that are on the winning side right now. One of them is the standard that Tesla uses. Ford and GM have just moved to that same standard, so that's going to be pretty interesting. But the other standard is from this Swiss-based ABB, And I think that's the same company that you're talking
It
about,
is.
Mark.
It is.
Okay. And that seems to be the standard that Europe is gradually moving towards for all of its electrical vehicles. It appears that at some point, if the things keep converging the way they are, we might end up with an Apple Android system where there's two major systems for charging throughout the world. Cars aren't as portable as a lot of other things, so it probably doesn't make much difference as long as North America sticks to a particular standard and Europe sticks to a standard. They don't have to be the same, and they can be modified with adapters, both one to the other.
Mhm.
But ABB and Tesla right now appear to be the two that are kind of sitting out in front, with the dark horse in my mind being whatever system the Chinese companies are going to end up trying to adapt. Uh, my feeling is that they don't really like to adapt anything that the West has put together. And so if they're going to adapt a completely different system, that makes it maybe a three-player world when you're all finished, all said and done.
Yeah, and Siemens was on that list also as
Yes,
producing
it
trucks.
was.
So yeah, it is going to be quite the battle. I know that you guys have looked at ChargePoint quite a bit. Interestingly enough, ChargePoint is up 8% today, the stock price, and they're definitely right there in the middle of the pack. And now Ken has advised me that Plug Power is definitely not a direct competitor to ChargePoint, which is kind of what I was thinking when I went into it. But the higher return and some fairly decent numbers there. They do factor in when it comes to renewable type stuff with their
Yeah,
emphasis.
plug power is not the traditional charging station like it might imply with this name of plug going in, but essentially plug power is developing hydrogen cells for fuel, completely getting away from using rare earth metals or using any metal at all in the batteries. Without getting too technical, they're moving towards hydrogen fuel cells, and those cells actually are in production and actually being used in a lot of large equipment around the world today. Another whole type of technology that kind of bypasses the concept that you have to put a big battery with uh, uh, rare earths or anything into it into the car to make it run. Maybe you can develop these hydrogen cells, and again, we reduce the cost then from something that's fairly dear down to something that is readily available almost anywhere in the world with uh, the proper chemistry behind it, I guess I want to say.
So again, keep in mind that we're going to try to build a list of 10, maybe 12. Who knows, Ken? It might grow to 16 to 20 by the time we're done. But I would think that advanced energy is probably a candidate also with these two numbers. And AZZ is also probably boring, but could be fairly powerful. Maybe Borg Warner-ish when it comes down to how we think about these type of companies. So we'll see. Um, I also wanted to make sure that we captured GE, Siemens, and in this case Generac, because I think Generac is going to be a force in trying to fix some of the system anomalies as this thing all builds out. I mean, there's areas of the country already that are facing reliability shortfalls. Hopefully, we're not sitting in the middle of one of them, Ken. But
Siemens Mark is one of the companies that's developing technology that either complements ABB or
right.
competes with ABB in Europe. And Siemens is one of the companies that some of the smaller automakers, the original equipment
Mm-hmm.
manufacturers, have actually endorsed for their style of charging. It'll be interesting to see who wins that whole race when we're done. I really, really like Cummins in this mix also, Mark.
Yeah, there.
I think you can't count Cummins out of anything that's going on with heavy equipment and heavy machinery.
Yeah, and I would actually double down, and Donaldson has been a great company for a long time. They are heavily in the pollution control end, so they're going to be involved in a lot of stuff. But again, we got to draw the line somewhere. Siemens has nice numbers here.
Yep. Yep.
Notice that I've General Electric does not have nice numbers, but um, were you aware that General Electric is one of the top performing stocks in the stock market? And this doesn't even count, at least I'm pretty sure it doesn't count the spinoff of GE Health that we talked about a few weeks ago.
No, the 71% is just the GE stock itself, Mark.
Yeah, so I mean that
That's
doesn't
gone
count
up
the gain from.
fantastically this last year. Um,
So
all I have is a regret that I didn't add to my GE holdings before it split a long time ago. When it was $12 a share, $11 a share. So
well, I sat down a few months ago and considered dismissing it from the portfolio, and I had one of those stubborn moments, and then I got lazy, and then I got distracted, and um, thank goodness it's still there in the portfolio. So sometimes when you fail to act on something like that, you're actually sometimes stubborn is good. I guess is what I would say.
or forgetful. It sounds like my sister forgetting to take Netflix out of her portfolio about a year ago.
Oh, bonanza. Well,
Yeah.
we've done enough programs on GE that I don't think we need to regurgitate, other than to say I hope it's clear to everybody that the company on the right side is not the company on the left side of that chart. So you really do have to focus in on, where's the company going. In fact, they have one more spinoff yet to do. Um, it should be fascinating, because the company that is on the right hand side of, well, let's just draw one big line here. Um, the company that's on the right side of that is a different company than on the left side, so you have to look at it completely differently. You get a projected return even after the price run up of somewhere in the mid single digits. So again, if this growth trajectory is conservative just because we just don't see it coming yet, um, they also are going to benefit from the infrastructure stuff that we're talking about, and they are absolutely fantastic at what they do
And
in that realm.
my researcher, Mark, who I really trust, tells me that there's at least one more spinoff, that I should be talking like that, not just limiting it to a
Right.
single spinoff. So we have a hand in the air. Kim, your hand was up. Did you want to say something?
I did. Have you guys looked or heard about Blink? Blink?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mark, I don't know if it's appeared on any of your lists, but it's certainly a contender for what's going on with this whole thing that we're talking about right now.
I'll make sure that it's added to our coverage if it can be. I assume that it can be.
Yeah, it's only like a $5 stock, but they're also having, as I understand it, because I've been looking at this stock for a while, and and it gets off your radar because life happens. And I looked at it again, and I went, oh my. Their charging points and their connectors are superchargers, and it was devised by Tesla, but they're also working with to make sure it's also working with European, kind of either or. So something to look at and consider.
It has quite a history, Mark, of sales, at least 10 years. It doesn't have any history of earning anything, but it has a 10-year sales record. So and an interesting sales record too, especially the last 3 or 4 years.
Cool. Well, thanks, Kim. It's very good to hear your voice again.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't know, getting out and getting back in, it finally worked. My microphone worked.
And we were talking earlier about our Ardelyx being at $60, and that we would both be good with that price, right?
Absolutely. And when Ken laughs, well, I'm just going to say we'll see who the laugh is at.
I'm not laughing at all, Kim. I just know what Mark will be doing. He'll be dancing on top of his house, you know.
And I'll be up there with him.
Okay.
Good stuff. All right, continuing down this path of trying to identify a list of companies that we can narrow down, and I will add Blink to the list. Again, digging in, and this kind of goes with that theme where Matt presented a few weeks ago, actually probably a few months ago now, a company which is trying to leverage across both internal combustion vehicles and EVs, and they're doing a real nice job of being ready to serve no matter who wins. And same situation here. Silence at a roundtable approximately 4 or 5 months ago presented Littelfuse as a company that makes all those little components that go into all this stuff. And basically, no matter who wins, they will have products distributed across the spectrum. So just kind of throwing that in there as a reminder. Again, Borg Warner like thinking that it's always kind of cool to be invested in these type of companies. Who on this list reaches out to you, Ken?
Well, 2 months ago, I presented Fabrinet at the roundtable. FN, that's two beneath Littelfuse there. I presented it because it's a logistics company that helps other companies devise electrical systems, helps them from a consulting standpoint, but also helps them get all the little pieces that need to go into a complicated electrical situation. There's hundreds of different components that might be used in any particular application, and Fabrinet will help develop the supply chains and help solve the problems for another company that's trying to make something specific. It'll suggest ways to economize in the supply chain history. It'll suggest suppliers that they can use and ways they can coordinate those suppliers. Very interesting kind of second level. They're not actually building anything. They're not actually assembling anything, but they'll make a kit, for example, for a company where the things in the kit come from 15 or 20 or 30 different suppliers, and then that kit gets shipped directly to the second company where they can make whatever it is they're trying to put together. Very interesting company. I think pretty decent sales growth, 13%, pretty decent par value. And if you look at Fabrinet, it was presented in April. We put $1,000 into it, and that $1,000 today is worth about $1,300.
Nice.
So it certainly had some nice growth to it in the last couple of months.
Absolutely. And Pat Donnelly also presented, I believe, at the National Convention stock panel. Good stuff. All right. And, or at least he intended to if he didn't. Also the one up at the top, I'm not sure where they fit in, but Amphenol could be an interesting one to look at also. So we'll check that one and add it to the list. And again, if you're sitting out there in the audience and you know of a company that we should be thinking about in these terms, we just simply would ask, perhaps on the Manifest forum or in an email to either one of us, just simply tell us why you think the company's got an opportunity, a field of opportunity, why it will win, and why it should be considered going forward. So what might Amphenol prosper by going forward? All right. We talked briefly about this last week, this notion of the graphene potential batteries. And the fascinating thing that I take away from it is this. There were a couple of things. First of all, it would solve many of the dangers of fires and explosions from some of the lithium batteries. And I'm not sure exactly how, but it reduces that risk in some way. I would like to understand it a little bit better. And the other thing that came up was an expert in the area basically describing if you did have graphene-based batteries in your electric vehicle, You literally could recharge it up to 500 or 600-mile ranges in less time than it would take to fill your tank with gas today. And that to me is intriguing and compelling, if that's in any way, shape, or form viable or feasible. So that alone is enough to urge one to keep track of this type of a solution and potential going forward. Ken, did your clubs actually run into this at all?
No, we did not talk about this at all, and I'm making a note on this right now, but I'm chuckling over the person in the audience. That's not Buzzinga that Sheldon Cooper says. That's Benzinga. That's the name of is it a brokerage firm, Mark, or
Actually,
a
that's the,
data firm?
yeah, that's the Bloomberg News of Detroit.
Okay, all right.
And so we've spent some time with Benzinga. They're
But
good people.
that's not Sheldon Cooper saying Bazinga on this one here. No.
That's always funny when we run into it. Anyhow, one of the things I wanted to do with this one, and I'm still scratching my head over doing it or not, this company that's mentioned here, Avadane, you can actually invest in it privately. And Ken, I know the hairs on your neck just went up. I understand that.
Yeah, they
Um,
did.
um, you can actually use this netcapital.com. It's something that I discovered through this Benzinga connection. Yeah, I'm the crazy guy who tried to invest in VIX a few years ago just for the heck of it. I might even try this one just because this Avadine is something that you can invest in privately, and you can do it for as little as $250 amounts, which obviously you have to be willing to lose. This is not core investing in any way, shape, or form. What is kind of interesting is you can, for free, you don't have to own it to do this. They have a really nice presentation on how this graphene might impact the world of electrical infrastructure. And then I got kind of a kick out of this one down here. Be kind of interesting to see exactly what are they talking about. Could this be a Blink competitor? I don't know. But this was also one of the other companies that is out there, and there's others there. But I don't know, Ken. I think I might take a little
Well,
bit of a dive.
and just to be clear, Mark, this Power Hero is nothing like what we've been talking about in charging stations. We've been talking about fast charging stations which can compete with filling a car's tank with gas.
Mm-hmm.
This appears to be a tool that an apartment dweller could use to do a long-term charge in an electric vehicle.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the difference might be. I mean, we have a hybrid Pacifica van from Stellantis Chrysler, and we use 110 voltage, and we charge it up nicely overnight. It gives it basically a 35-mile
Well,
range on regular
this
electricity.
one's talking.
This
This
is
one's talking about using a 240 volt at home, so
yeah.
it's slow charging, not fast charging that like we've been talking about in the rest of the companies.
Mm-hmm. So interesting stuff. All right, and then I don't know if Sean Mace is in the audience, but Ken actually brought Tesla to this conversation. So I, I needed smelling salts and had to pick myself off the floor. But if we're talking about this subject, and it actually comes at it from a different angle, they're obviously in EVs, RVs too, probably as far as I know. But they are truly an energy company. Also, Sean has actually chronicled the addition of solar panels to his house and shared that kind of stuff. Um, so hold on for just a second. Ken, I need to step away for just a second. Go ahead and explain your inspiration.
Okay, well, Tesla was one of the companies that came up when we started dealing with this about 16, 18 months ago. Companies that you didn't think of in doing charging stations and doing things at that level that you thought of for something else were coming up on our lists. Another company that comes up on our list continually is BP, British Petroleum. And BP is doing a lot of work with creating technology for charging stations. I think that BP is doing everything it can to develop businesses to run in parallel with its oil industry, and maybe at some point in the future become the leader of the company rather than just a kind of a bolt-on piece right now. Tesla has been very proactive in developing these charging stations throughout the country, and then actually placing them in a lot of different places, a lot of different situations, so that you can conceivably move larger distances than the electric vehicle gives you on a single charge. You still have to know where they are, but I think most of us now have gotten to the point where we're starting to notice them in various places. Even if we live in a rural area like I do, I'm noticing when I move to places where there's a lot of commercial traffic. It doesn't have to be heavy industry. It just has to be commercial traffic coming from the outskirts. I'm noticing charging stations where I didn't notice them 3 and 4 years ago. So
Yeah, no,
Tesla's right there with it. Yeah.
yeah, and it's in our opinion, it may just be the tip of an iceberg, and this is actually taken from their Investor Day presentation just a few weeks ago, and kind of an interesting topic. You may recall back when we first started talking about this subject in the F-150s and the Chevrolet counterpart, where the truck in the driveway was actually powering the house for a few days. That sort of thing. You take that concept and extrapolate it to Sean's energy system at his house, and there's actually areas of the country where they are beginning to look at what if they used the Tesla network as one big distributed battery for the electric utility. And they found a way to do that, the smart grid thing and all that stuff. So, Tesla is basically making the point, we are just barely skimming the surface of that concept and the ramifications. So just kind of wrap your head around that. And Ken, I'm pleased to see you join the Tesla party.
Oh no, I'm not. I'm not buying this stock yet, Mark. I still have big questions. Even if Tesla is much more than an auto company, I still have huge questions about the valuation for this company and what's pushing people into buying it. I still think that this fear of missing out is a large part of what goes on with Tesla stock.
Yep, and they still, I mean, obviously there's still a lot of questions out there, but it is a fairly impressive longer term track record, decent growth rate, quality is improving. There's just a lot of things at work here, and we're still looking, even after the price run up. By the way, I do own some shares of Tesla. They were purchased closer to 100 not that long ago. So, full disclosure. So we'll continue this hunt, including taking a look at the companies we've already mentioned and adding some others to the pile next week, and see if we can't wrap up our portfolio, which will successfully compete with Jimmy Cramer's COVID portfolio performance. Just a quick reminder, we do archive all of these presentations, including the roundtables and bull sessions and any other educational topics which might come across the transom at YouTube. If you just go to Manifest Investing, you will find this page, and you can actually dig back and check out some of this stuff. We spent some nice moments with the St. Louis crowd right here in this presentation talking about some rules of investing rules to live by. All right. So I thought I'd leave us with that orangey sky in New York. This is just amazing. The Canadian fires. Just wanted to point out that we were actually there a few weeks before that with our slide that we've been showing for a while. But wow, the skies here in Michigan didn't get quite that noticeably impacted. But this is
we got to the place where we got fantastic sunsets, but nothing like New York got. But we can still smell the fire even down here among all the lakes and everything. We've had very little rain, and that lets the fire stay in the air, lets the cloud particles, the smoke particles stay in the air. And it really has been something to deal with breathing wise for a lot of folks.
Yeah, it's noticeable even here. I can't imagine being in New York, and
Yep.
in that
Yep.
situation. All right, that pretty much wraps up things for today. Again, we'll be back with more electrifying stuff next week, and we'll see what we can figure out.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck out there.